go ahead and can speak up. Are you on?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yeah. Is it Stefan or Stefan?
Stefan.
Stefan, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for being
Thank you.
on today.
So I've written several, I guess, short stories, memoirs of episodes of my adult life, and of varying lengths. And I'm looking for a way to kind of weave them together. And I wonder if I should worry about that now or just write more stories and define that thing where that theme or what comes out of that. And any suggestion about how to sort of plan out this, with that outline, because I'm thinking in terms of particular stories, but not in terms of chapter, and so forth.
One of the themes that we've talked about today is that particularly in memoir, writing is really exploratory. Like the outline our outline here is really light in terms of its structure. Mm-hmm. So my first instinct here is to tell you what's working for you. But I tell you to do what's working for you, right? Like if you want to keep writing these stories that seem disjointed or not fully connected, and see if you can find your theme, yeah, give it a try. Recognize that you may then at some point set that aside and start fresh on a full draft.
Right.
But that may just be part of your process.
Okay. And then all I've done with this is sometimes read them at, writing groups. Is there... I guess there is a market, but I don't know what about for getting short memoir stories published. And does that work for you or against you if you eventually want to publish this as a novel, a book length memoir?
Well, so my advice to anybody who asks this question is going to be just write for yourself right now and don't worry about those questions. They can really be impediments to getting your writing done, like trying to figure out how I'm going to navigate the market and what's the right title. And honestly, Stefan, I would just write. And when you have great stories, then you can think about where to publish them. And I'll be frank, I honestly don't know enough about that market to be able to give you an intelligent answer.
Okay. Because I was thinking the opposite of that. I think I have some good stuff. And if I actually got that external validation, just even, I don't know, a literary magazine, or something like that, or online, but someone else, then I would actually have more motivation to write, because I've written a lot of stuff and not done anything with it. I mean, it's helped me. I no regrets. I advise everyone to write their bios, write their journals, memoirs, but I like to see something of it, even in the short term, before I have a book out there, I guess.
Yeah. First, a great story, then go from there.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. So let's do...
I actually want to respond to a comment here. Someone was commenting while Stefan and I were talking about the New Yorker publishes some really nice stuff. Yes, the New Yorker does publish really nice stuff. To be really frank, it'll be almost impossible for you guys to get in there, right? That is the highest level of fiction writing in the country in terms of publication. So great if you can get yourself published. Don't aim for the New Yorker. It's basically impossible.
Yeah, and also I wouldn't even be thinking about any of that stuff.
Yeah,
if you're tackling a memoir, if you really want the validation aspect that Stefan was talking about, post the core concept on Medium or your blog or something and just gauge the response. If that's really important to you. I mean, that's how I ended up writing Play It Away. It started with an essay that blew up. But I wouldn't even be thinking that far ahead for a memoir. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. It's potentially just really, you're creating reasons not to write.
Yeah.
Charlie, got anybody else?
Yeah, let's try Christian one more time. Hopefully he can get his mic up and running this go round. Or I accidentally, I believe.
It looks like Annie or Ani.
Sorry. Yeah, Annie jumped right as I was clicking the button. So we'll do Annie or Ani.
Yeah, I think
hello. No, it usually unmutes on their end. Well, that's also not working. So we'll jump to Christian again.
Third time's the charm, I hope.
Yep. Chris,
Hi.
hey, how
There
are
we
you?
are.
Hello. Cool. Thank you for doing this. Uh, I just had a question or kind of your thoughts on having a memoir with mixed media in it, where I have some poems that are like relevant to the specific stories that I want to include, or photographs from the uh, whether the trips to the different parts of the Philippines and the reflections on that, or writing a story of that. What's your thought on that?
It's great.
Yeah. If that's the best way you can express what you want to express and find your truth, great.
Pictures make it even more real.
Yeah.
Um, and also, kind of, I know Tucker spoke on the difference between the knowledge share and the memoir, and there have been maybe a few. I believe Hal was saying that David Goggins was kind of a nice mix, a little bit between that. Do you see it as a detriment to have some form of that sharing, like the knowledge sharing in a memoir? Where does a line cross where you don't really want to do that for the memoir?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of variations on this question in the last 3 days. Like the straight answer is there is no bright line, except, well, I should walk that back, because I would say a memoir, if you're truly writing memoir, you're not trying to teach anything. You're just writing for yourself. People may learn something from it, but you're not trying to specifically teach. If you think you want to teach something, then you really are in knowledge share. Even if your book is 90% your own experience, which is what Goggins was. You know, Goggins' book is really, it's his story. But then at the end of certain chapters, he would essentially turn to the reader and say, so that's what I did. What are you going to do? You know, what's your challenge? How are you going to step up? And he didn't lay out necessarily prescriptions, but really almost more kind of in your face challenges to people. It was an intriguing approach. I haven't seen it very often, and I wouldn't necessarily try to emulate it.
Okay.
Is that good, Christian?
Yes, thank you. Also, just quick, I just want to give my appreciation. I know Tucker was doing a lot of the instructions, but I did appreciate all the support staff and all the work y'all are doing to put this out for free. And it is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got
It's
it, Christian.
Really, yeah, really fun to see all you guys participating and enjoying it. We're all getting a lot out of it on our end too.
Awesome. So thank you, Christian. So I want to, since we have Hal on the line, I do want to
Last
ask,
one standing.
I want to ask a question of you. You're in a very unique position where you were the editor for a book that has been in the top 5 most read and most sold over the last year, David Goggins. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how it pertains to some of the things that we learned today?
Well, so first off, to clarify, like David came to us with a largely finished manuscript. So we did not help him write it, but we did work with him on editing it. And it was well written, it was well polished. So my role as his editor, I took a relatively light hand, as I said, because it was in such good shape, but it was to really try to inhabit the reader's point of view and to give him like some emotional feedback. It's a very emotional book, and to say like, wow, I'm feeling this here, I'm feeling this here, because he was taking us on an emotional journey. That's what a good book does, certainly a good memoir. And then there were places where I pushed him for more, which is a typical role that an editor does, is tell me more, go deeper, what did this mean? I don't understand. A lot of what an editor is doing is giving you another set of eyes to see what you can't see because you're too close to the book. That's probably the most succinct definition of an editor's work. And that with David, that's really what I'd say the most useful thing that I did.
What about his book what traits of his book can listeners keep in mind as they work on their memoirs? Because his truly is like one of the greatest memoirs arguably ever written. So what did you see in his writing that others can apply to theirs?
The thing you are most afraid to write about is the thing you have to write about. If you don't want to write about it, if you don't want to talk about it, if you don't want to stand in that truth, then you are shying away from the thing that makes your book most powerful. David had a truly, truly horrible childhood, and he wrote very, very honestly about it. And then he was incredibly hard on himself in his life, and he was really honest about that. If that honesty hadn't been in there, the book is nothing. And you know, I like to think of one of my favorite memoirs is Wild, and Cheryl Strayed did the same thing. She wrote about her heroin addiction in a really raw way. She wrote about sexual desire in a really honest way, where she clearly was like, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I'm going to write this because it's my truth. And that's why those books are so good. In both those cases, you know, Cheryl Strayed hikes the Pacific Trail. David goes and does these amazing physical feats of endurance. There certainly is an armature that makes their stories interesting, but what makes them work is that deep, deep honesty. And that's what so much of we've been talking about today is why Tucker pushes so hard on this stuff, because you can tell a story that's boring, or you can tell a story that really connects. And the connecting part is hard, but it's what you have to do if you want your memoir to be good.
Really good. Thank you, Hal. And it makes perfect sense that David was able to go as deep as he did because of his philosophy of like overriding the governor of pain. He was able to apply that to writing a book. It's amazing. So we have a hand raised from Roy. Roy, can you hear us, sir? Are you on? Check, check. Roy?
You're looking muted. You need to unmute yourself.
I'm trying to unmute.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it's not working. It must not work if they. Oh, can you hear us, Roy?
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Now
Yes.
we can. Yes.
Oh, good. I finished what is a self-help book, but it has a good part of it is memoir, kind of like Failure to Success, and something that really helped me. The challenge I've got, especially hearing from a pretty well-known author in this area, Alan Hardy, who told me unknowns like you, now this was a helpful comment, but unknowns like you rarely get read. So my concern is about marketing, or if you don't want to discuss that now because we're not talking about marketing, it's well down the road. Where should I turn to learn a little bit about that?
We have, Charlie, help me out here. We have the marketing school up, right? Is that available for people?
Yeah. Taylor, are you still on? If you are, would you please post a link to our marketing course where we go in deep depth on every marketing angle you could possibly take and show you tactically step by step how you can accomplish the marketing goals that you want to accomplish. Tucker talked about this a bit over the past 2 days, but it's a really important point, which is a book is a marketing tool. It is not the thing that you market. So you are not usually, unless you're a fiction writer, you're not trying to market your book to sell a bunch of copies. You are ultimately using your book as a marketing tool to leverage into opportunities or relationships or things that you want that are outside of the book. Am I making sense, Roy?
Yeah, I remember that, and that made sense. That probably doesn't apply to me because I'm older than any of you guys, and I'm interested in getting the message out, which I think will help. There was a message that was taught by Stephen Covey and his partner Hiram Smith about 30 years ago about core values, and it's died out when they retired. And as of last November, when Hiram Smith died, they both passed. And so I would like it read by a bunch of people. I'm in pretty good shape financially, so I'm not looking to make money off of it. I'm just looking to get it read. Now, the only thing I could come up with is, I was a marketer at P&G, but that doesn't help you at all with book marketing. I know a lot about marketing, but nothing about book marketing. But I thought maybe I could take part of the book and serialize it on Medium or sites like that to see if I could build an audience. And if I built the audience, I could either serialize the whole thing on Medium, at which point they would have to buy the book, or it would convince them to buy the book. That's the only thing that appealed to me.
Your ideas are potentially legitimate. Here's the thing, like Charlie knows more about marketing than I do, but I want to kind of keep this conversation focused more on what's going to help people who are starting their memoirs. I would point you to that marketing course as a starting point.
Okay, good.
In addition to that, I mean, I've got a bunch of thoughts on this, Roy, but if you want to get the message out there, there's a good book called Contagious by Jonah Berger that is very worth reading in terms of there are certain things that cause a message to spread. There are certain characteristics that they share. And so if those elements are not baked in to your message, it won't spread. Mm-hmm. And so it's a much, much longer conversation. Like Hal said, I don't want to veer too off onto the marketing angle because it's not as relevant for most people, but that is one resource that I would highly recommend that you read and absorb before you tackle this. Because
so that's Contagious by Berger.
Yeah, you can put your message onto it. Like the tools are available to all of us, right? Like we have the most amazing distribution tools in the existence of humanity at our disposal. The question is, can you tell the message in such a way that will cause it's baked in, that it will spread and other people will consume it and share it with their colleagues and friends. So again, much longer conversation. I want to stick to memoirs, but okay, I appreciate the question, Roy.
I don't want to hijack this. Thank you very much.
You got it. Thank you for being on with us.
I've seen a couple of questions about title. If you're looking to pull somebody else in on hot seat, let me just speak about titles really quickly, which is frankly, like so many things we've talked about today, don't worry about it right now. Get yourself a working title. It doesn't matter what it is. Just put something down, my story, like whatever you want to call it. The point is, when you have a bad title, and it'll probably be a bad title, and that's fine, it gets your brain starting to work toward finding a good title. And particularly in memoir, but I think this is true in many books, your title will reveal itself in the writing. Like you'll come across a phrase, an idea, a concept, especially in memoir, you might come across a phrase, and you'll see that, oh, that's it. The very first book I wrote was called The Falling Season. And that was literally a phrase someone used in conversation with me that I quoted in the book. And I didn't have that title until I'd written most of the book. So don't stress about your title. Get something bad and simple, and then let let your brain just work on it over time.
Yeah. The 4-Hour Work Week was originally titled Drug Dealing for Fun and Profit.
Yeah.
So
I remember hearing
So luckily he changed that. So let's bring on Drew and Dean, a duet. Let's see if this is, it says you are not available actually, Drew and Dean, because you're using an older version of Zoom. Sorry to call you out on using an older version of Zoom, but it says that you are unable to talk. So if you want to talk, unfortunately, you got to do a software upgrade.
We've been learning so much in this pandemic. Like, who knew that Zoom did that to people?
All right. So, Rick, you are on. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Thank you so much for doing this. This has been an amazing learning experience. I wanted to ask, what can you do as someone who has not written a ton except for like school and work and emails and things, but what can you do to like improve your style, your communication? How do you convey something in a more palatable format than like either a really clinical, here's what happened at, 12:42, and then, versus the other side of like really getting too flowery. That's it.
Charlie, you've been nodding and nodding like you're trying to answer this question.
Well, it's funny because a client of mine is a blockchain attorney, and he gets into jargon from 0 to 60 like in 1 second flat. So I've had to coach him a bit on this process, and so there's a bunch of things, but the two that come to mind immediately are to have real conversations and record them with people who maybe don't fully understand your topic and don't have the technical grasp that you have, and you have to speak in as plain of English as possible. So even if you have to talk to your 13-year-old nephew or whatever, like, I would strongly encourage that if your muscle is to dive into that kind of clinical stuff when you sit at the keyboard, get that transcribed using a software like the Scribe or Rev or Temi. And then the second thing is, there's a great book called Words That Work, and I forget who wrote it. Taylor, if you wouldn't mind, please posting an Amazon link to that book. This guy advises politicians and basically like simplifies their language and how they need to speak, but it's applicable to writing. So Hal, I'll let you go from there.
I mean, I don't have much to add, honestly. Like, I have much more old school advice, which is I use a baseball analogy. Like, if you want to be good at baseball, you got to go watch the pros play, which means you got to read a lot, right? You got to swing at a lot of balls, means you got to write a lot, and you got to have a coach, which means you need an editor. Now, that's all well and good, but it sounds like it's a big stone to roll up the hill. I think Charlie's advice, I was going to say the thing I would add is just try speaking it. Like, rather than writing, try one of these dictation apps that we've been talking about, and just take a half an hour and tell one of your stories as authentically as you can, and then use that as notes to write from, and see if that helps you get out of perhaps that more clinical business style that you're so used to, and to just be more authentic, because that's what you're reaching for, is authenticity.
So, Rick, was that helpful?
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. All right. So how are you doing on time? I don't want to just, you good?
Sure, this is my job, man. This is what I do.
All right.
We can go a while longer, another 10 or 15 minutes if you want.
Cool. So we'll do Deborah, then Eric, then Leah, and we'll see how we are on time then.
We're slowly whittling it down. We're down to like 120. We might outlast them all if we stay here long.
Right. Deborah, can you hear us?
I can. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to tell you thank you. This is absolutely fabulous. I have a very good story that I initially 20 years ago was going to put into a memoir, but after all the progression from finding my truth and all the changes from, let me back up. Literally, I was given a black mark for that I would be living in a brace and sling, drug-induced comfort for the rest of my life. And I was able to bypass all of that, even from Mayo Clinic and I made it, is what I did. And it's that story. So it's naturally through leaving Western medicine and going into all alternative, I was able to find my own truth and walk it, live it for the last 20-some years. I'm also a trainer, or I was a trainer until now. And so I'm at a cross between memoir and writing it for business, but where do you start? Do you just write the memoir and let it unfold and take it to the other levels, or what do you do?
So, Deborah, were you on Monday and Tuesday for these sessions? Okay. I would start there, because if you are interested in teaching, and it sounds like you are, you're a trainer. And
I may.
Then your memoir is going to be a big part of your book, because it legitimizes your story, what you're teaching. It's huge.
Right.
But the structure that we taught for what we're calling the reputation book, and we recognize it's not a great description, but it's a knowledge transfer book. That's really the structure that's going to work for you.
Okay.
I would go back, review those recordings, look at the Scribe method, and really use our process for finding your audience, defining your avatar, doing all of those steps. And then your story, the memoir aspects of the book, are what you're going to pull on to support the points you're teaching.
Okay.
And it sounds like you got to get clear on objectives. Like, what are you ultimately wanting from this process? And if it's to share your truth, great, memoir. If that is the primary objective, but if there are business objectives that are equal or higher weight, then it's a knowledge transfer.
Well, it's really to utilize my talents to help others with it, you know, knowing that they can, you know, they
Then
can overcome and
Yeah.
everything. So that's why I was foggy between those two lines. And I've done a lot of deep work for 26 years. And it feels so good to be on the other side. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it. And trust the process, because a lot of people have been through it. And just, you know, if you're unsure or uncertain, go back and revisit those sections, because they will be really helpful.
Yeah, because I've taken a lot of notes and a lot of journals for many years, and I've just dove deep and deep and deep. So layer after layer after, yeah, it's like, God, can there be any more layers? And then another one pops up. So thank you so much. The other question I did have is, if and when I want to take a in-person class after we get rid of the pandemic that's going on, would that just be on the website to to review that if there are classes available?
Yeah, you can. All our services are at scribewriting.com. You can see what we do. We're, as Tucker's been saying, we're not trying to sell you anything.
Right.
I will reiterate what he said quickly as he was taking off at the end of this session. Please, in the survey that Charlie's going to send out, like, share us your thoughts. Like, if you want a particular service, you can imagine something you want from us, tell us. And
Yes.
if we get enough interest, we'll create something.
And that survey should automatically pop up when you leave Zoom. But a little mental shortcut that will allow you to uncover like what would be helpful for us is to talk about, okay, now you've been through these workshops, what is the number one pain point or challenge you are going to face in getting your book done? And just by sharing that will also, like, even if you don't know what you want, just by sharing that will help us figure out solutions for you.
Okay. Well, you guys have been great, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a good one. All right. So next we have Eric. All right. Eric, can you hear us? Looks like he's unmuted. Hello, hello. All right, I'll disable him. We'll come back to him if in a few minutes. We have Jason. All right, Jason, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Welcome. Where are you listening from?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. All right. Well, thank you for being on the workshop. How can we help?
This is just before you start, Jason. This is starting to feel like an old-style call-in radio show.
That's what I'm going. You're listening to Casey Kasem.
Jason from Las Vegas. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. So first thing I want to thank you guys for hosting this, and just not to take up too much of your time. So I'll be kind of brief. But if you had to just narrow it down to like the hardest thing that you've seen with authors with their memoirs, what could you do or say to them in order to like have them go over the hurdle or break out of the ice that prevents them from writing it? What do you see as the biggest thing that they're struggling with?
Charlie, well, let's start with your experience. Like, what did you struggle with?
I would say probably there's a couple of things, and Tucker covered them, but my experience was I hadn't gone through the emotional work to fully process certain things. So I hadn't done therapy around them. And because of that, I ended up, like, if you read Play It Away, it's not that long of a book, but it was like within a Russian nested doll of another book that I had to cut it out. If that makes sense. It was like a giant book that was, there was so much nonsense in there because I hadn't fully processed a lot. So like he talked about, write from your scars, not from your wounds. I was writing a lot from my wounds still. So there was just so much to unpack. That's my personal experience. And that was my first answer before I thought about it for myself, is like, you haven't done some form of therapy.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, as far as my experience working with other authors goes, So first off, most of my work is with people doing, I'd say like 80% of my work is with people doing the stuff we were talking about Monday and Tuesday, these more knowledge transfer books. But a lot of those books contain memoir components. And so what I say here should be relevant. And the things are self-judgment and fear. So
Okay.
what we're teaching, like the through lines you see in what we're teaching here are really around trying to get you past those things. So for instance, in memoir, just write for yourself. I see we've seen questions all day long coming up about, well, what about this? And what about that? And the answer is always just pull it back to you're just writing for yourself. And then the self-judgment question is they're tied, right? People fear self-judgment, but they also fear other people's judgments.
Yes,
So
I agree.
the self-judgment thing is all around our vomit draft process. Just write, only go forward. It seems weird to not read over what you've done, but it's the way you have to do it. It's the way you have to shut your editor down. I heard a story from somebody that I really liked. Apparently Walt Disney had this idea that each of us contains 3 personas: a creator, an editor, and like a logistician. And
Okay.
when he was trying to get his team to do stuff, what he would tell them is like, you've got these 3 inside you. They're all going to get their turn, but they have to take turns. So now is the creator's time. So let's have some ideas. And then they would brainstorm. Hey, how about if we had this crazy mouse and he had big ears and he wore shorts with suspenders? And someone said, and then someone would say, well, that's ridiculous. And then he'd say, no, that's the editor. The editor has to wait. The editor can talk later. And then same thing then for the executor, like, well, how do I market? How do I publish? For Disney, it was like, well, how do we show this? We got to figure out how to make a cartoon. That came later. And so our process here is really about trying to break those steps out and keep you guys focused on just being the creator. Acknowledge your editor, acknowledge your logistician, park them on a bench, and tell them you'll come to them later. And if you can do those things, and with this added layer of, as Charlie was describing, that you may have therapeutic work you need to do in your book, but if you do those things at a minimum, you're going to get a good start.
Okay, yeah, I get it. Thank you for sharing that. So I just take away from that is I'm just the editor. The other individuals come on stage later and you acknowledge them for right now.
You're the creator.
You're just the creator. You're just creating.
Yep.
You're not the editor yet. Yes. Thank you, Jason.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's so much. That's really well said. And that explains my issue while I was working on my book, is I was trying to be, when I should have just been creating, I was thinking too far ahead.
Ask me how I know. To quote someone we both know.
Oh, gosh. All right. So let's try Eric again. Eric, can you hear us? Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
We've been waiting for you.
I've been trying to get it figured out, and I just swapped headsets.
Good man.
Right.
How can we help?
Okay, so all of this has already been a great help, especially the last 2 questions. But if we can maybe refine it a little bit more, I'm coming to find that I have at least 3 books in me, and especially when I take into account, you can write memoirs from different periods of life as opposed to just writing your whole life in one book. And I also feel like if I do, so I have these 3 separate books, each one goes in a slightly different angle. And I guess my question is, I'm just looking for maybe a little bit of help on which one to prioritize, which one to set the foundation with.
So are these all memoirs?
They could be, although at some point I would like to integrate them, some of the topics, into other instructional knowledge sharing books.
There's a phrase I like a lot, which is, you can have everything you want, you just can't have it all at once. And in this regard, I would say, yeah, you might write 3 books, but you have to figure out which one you want to write first. And to do that, I would pull back to some of the framing questions we were talking about, particularly Monday especially. Why are you doing this? What's in it for you? What does success look like? And if that's not working because it's really memoir based, then you'll have answered that question, right? Okay, I really do need to be writing a memoir here. And then I don't know, Charlie, because you've done a memoir, I have not. How would you address that if you felt you had several different ways you wanted to come at your life? How would you sort that?
Well, so I'm not saying this is the answer, Eric, but as a thought exercise, sometimes it can be overthinking. So which one do you feel most strongly about? That which one do you feel most drawn toward right now?
At this moment or at the beginning of the class today? Because
I mean,
I started
right
with one and right at this, I literally couldn't tell you. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, like I said,
I'm just tired.
Right. Yeah. So I second what Hal said is, take some time to process it and come back to some of the earlier materials and try and sift through it. In terms of, I feel like we touched on this a bit of like, what is the best book you could write right now? I mean, there are certain books that if I look back, like I could have written
Was that relative to necessity? Would you say the best is relative to being in service? What might be of the most service in the context of 2020? Or
depends,
okay,
depends on your goals.
You're talking about external. You're talking about writing for someone else. Now, if we're talking about memoir, we really want to start with you.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
The meta theme here is you have to make decisions, right? You will have to close some doors, at least for a while. And there will be no absolute way to know what's the right choice. You have to make a choice though. And I agree with Charlie. There's a shit ton that's come down on you guys in the last 3 days. Let some of this stuff macerate and then try something. Go back to the documents that we've shared with you guys, work through some of those exercises, start journaling, and at some point commit to something.
Yeah. And in the mindset that one person brought up was so good of just being curious and exploring. And that's a wonderful mindset at the outset. And like remove that pressure to have the definitive answer at this point, especially. You just went through so much information that it would be incredible if, some of you definitely know what you want to write about, what the book is about, but remove that pressure. You don't have to know right now. It's totally fine.
Well, great. I'm also feeling I should share this. I'm realizing something that you guys have talked about over the past couple of days, and that is that even though today is the memoir class and I went through the past couple of days of the Reputation book, I'm realizing that maybe some of these additional memoirs that have been popping up in the past couple hours, or the potential for them, can be converted into Reputation books as opposed to making it 3 different memoirs. I could still write one memoir, but then have multiple knowledge sharing or Reputation books instead, and stack those appropriately.
Tucker said, this is to take the pressure off of having to write the one perfect book. Like, you can write multiple books. This is your first book.
Yes.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Much love.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. All right. So let's do one last question and then we'll call it a wrap. So Harry's got his hand raised. Harry, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes, sir. How can we help?
Well, I guess I'm the last one, huh?
Make it good.
Final countdown.
Oh, God. I thought the pressure was big enough before this, man. But, yeah, one final thank you to both of you guys. I've been in this since day one, and it's just it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you now directly.
Thank you.
So a lot of thoughts have been going through my head these last few days, especially today. And the question I wanted to kind of pose to you guys, you talk a lot about fear. And I mean, I've been kind of exploring my fears, my deepest fears, as part of like the process of writing this memoir. And my deepest fear kind of relates to some of the things you guys talked about with like self-sabotage and self-judgment. I've kind of learned, I've gone on this journey where I've learned that my biggest fear is that I don't matter. I could die tomorrow and nobody would notice. It's like this deep sort of, just way down in there. And so I think that what I'm most afraid of is sort of writing this as a method of like catharsis. And that's, you know, it's that self-judgment, it's that self-sabotage that really is part of your fear. That I've gone on this journey to really, this is something I wake up and face every day, and I've made immense strides in getting over it. However, it's something I face every day, and it relates to that self-judgment that we talk so much about. So I'll at the risk of going into too much detail here, I'll kind of put it back onto you guys. Can you perhaps explore these thoughts of mine a little more deeply when it comes to the writing process, when it comes to just, you know, getting out of your own way and going in that direction?
Wow, that's a wide open question. I'm not sure how much this will help you, but for me, the most powerful thing is habit, right? It's habit tied with giving yourself permission to write shit, right? And if you just do that and just keep doing that, then you'll get somewhere. And it's a way of taking the pressure off yourself. So I'm not sure if I'm going to help you very much with that answer, but that's where I would start is, journey of 10,000 miles starts with a single step and so on. Just lowering your expectations for what you're going to accomplish and just begin.
So Harry, I've got a couple thoughts. How much have you explored where that narrative comes from?
A lot of places. My childhood, mostly. I had a kind of a bully for an older brother. I got a father that's somewhat domineering. I'm the youngest of my family. I'm used to getting talked over and used to getting kind of disregarded from my family's perspective. And just, several heartbreaks, several issues with socializing and, high level introversion for that matter. And then facing some of my fears when it comes to actually socializing and believe, changing my identity about a person whose thoughts and opinions don't matter with things. This is all stuff I can go into more detail for. I'm trying to keep it as specific as possible.
No, I appreciate that.
Kind of, for sure. That's where it all kind of finds its origin.
Well, thank you for saying so. And have you shared those truths that you just said with anybody else, or do you mostly keep these to yourself?
Mostly keep them to myself. I've shared them with very close friends, and that was kind of the process in perhaps getting over it, was having the courage and the vulnerability to, to open up to to just really, I can count on one hand the number of people I've had these kind of conversations with.
What was their response when you shared those truths?
It almost felt too heavy for them, right? Like they were there for me. They were there to listen and to absorb it. But again, it's not, I don't know. How do you respond to that, right? Like, this person is telling me that he doesn't matter, that if he died tomorrow, nobody would notice. This person's thinking, well, fuck, dude, I would notice. How is that even, practical, right? And so it definitely wasn't for nothing, but it was a process of for my sake, for being vulnerable and opening up and being able to take that first step. So
yeah, and it's so hard, even with close friends, to have people who can just hold space, listen, accept, and love you for sharing that. They're rare. It's a rare breed of people who can do that,
right? Even
with closest friends. So, the book that, and I believe Hal worked on this book too, but that Philip McKernan wrote, I think is actually a really helpful one throughout this exercise of writing your memoir. And it's actually a great, I would say, a transition into writing the memoir, of reading that book. It has prompts for sharing your truth. And the core message of that book is your story matters.
Exactly. That's Philip's whole point of view. I'm so glad you brought that up. And in fact, everybody who does our One Last Book class with us, which you guys saw a lot of the slides today, they read that book first. And I would highly recommend that to you, Harry. That's a great recommendation. And that is.
Sorry, can you tell me one more time? I'm sorry to cut you off. The title was what?
It's called
One Last Talk. And if Taylor's still on, if you wouldn't mind posting a link to that, that would be great. I've given 2 One Last Talks. It is, if you were going to, perfect example, actually, if you were going to die tomorrow, what would you say and who would you say it to? And it can't be political. It can't be what you think other people should do. Just sharing your truth. And I delivered my first one to my wife, and we'd been married for years. It was something I'd never told anybody.
Yeah.
And then I delivered my second one to Scribe, to all the people at my company. And I felt like dog shit afterward, and felt like I'd been exposed, and like I was this villain initially and this terrible person, and got the exact opposite response when people coming up to me and telling me the exact opposite. So I'm curious, like, does anybody relate to what Harry said? Raise your hand, because I relate to it, certainly. And you can see in the attendee list, there are at least 10 other people who relate to what you said. And so if nothing else, I would take like, hey man, you're not alone in this regard, but you do have some next steps in front of you that you can take to help you work through this. Well,
that was heavier than I anticipated it to be. Even just opening this up to you and the remainder of the attendees here, I was a little hesitant to ask this question in the first place because I was afraid of how I'd be able to phrase it. And even right now, I'm kind of short of breath and somewhat, even hands are kind of trembling, right? Good. So I'm already feeling it. And this is why there's a lot of uncertainty, though, in perhaps moving this direction. Like, I just lost my job on Monday, right? And so it's like a lot of stuff going on right now in the world. And I went through this knowing that there'd be a great amount of difficulty in just navigating not just this course, but my own miasma of thoughts and issues if I were to take them on. So thank you for working with me and staying steady as I try to elaborate.
Thank you for being brave enough to come on and talk. You voiced what a lot of people are thinking in some form, and it's really powerful. So just here now, today, you made a huge difference, and thank you for that.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Al. Charlie.
Seconded. And this was such a huge first step for you, I think, on this journey. So keep walking.
I appreciate that, man. Now, and Charlie, I read your book in 2013, whenever it was that it came out. I was one of the first people to buy it. I was on your email list, and I found a great amount of value was drawn from that book. So it's great to have a chance to tell you personally. We've emailed before, but to tell you one-on-one, it feels great.
I was going to say, thank you, Harry. And I was going to say, I recognize this name. I wasn't totally sure. So thank you for hopping on and sharing all that. That was wonderful.
Thank you, man. Well, that's it for me, guys. I'm gonna go with that.
All right, go take a walk outside or something. Here.
Yeah,
I know that was big. So, all right, good for you, man. All right, well, thank you so much again to Harry, to everybody who was on in these questions. You guys were awesome, especially everybody who was on for all 3 days. Man, oh man, good on you guys for going through all this with us. So, Hal, do you have any parting words?
I'm really grateful to everybody who's been here the last 3 days. This was an experiment for us at Scribe. We cooked this up really fast. You should have seen us last week coming up with this. And this, I feel, has been a great success for us internally to Scribe. And it's only because you all showed up and participated and done the work. And I speak for all of us, both those of us who've been on camera and those of us who have been working behind the scenes. We really, really appreciate you all being here. And we do this because of you. So thank you. And onward.
100%. This was such a wonderful day for me personally, and an awesome way to end it. So thank you guys for hopping on and doing some hot seats. It was super fun. And yeah, everything Hal said, I feel the exact same. So here's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to leave the chat open for the next 5 to 10 minutes, probably 10 minutes. I'm going to play some soft, inspiring memoir music to guide you guys out, exit the threshold, so to speak. And yeah, you'll be hearing from us again. I would highly recommend, again, you subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's going to be all these videos. I'm going to edit them so they're lesson by lesson, nice and easy to go through, digest. It's not going to be a 7-hour video. It's going to be bite-sized chunks. So yeah, that's it. So thank you guys so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And we all hope to one day read your books.